In the previous video, we finished off our encapsulation challenge. Let's make a start now on polymorphism. So I want to go through and give you an overview of what it is and show you how it works. And then in the video following this one, we're going to give you a challenge for it. Now, incidentally, this is take 2 of my polymorphism video. You can see at the top of the screen there, it says polymorphism 2. And that's because I recorded the entire lecture and went to edit the video and found the sound was corrupted. Very frustrating having to do it twice. So anyway, let's get started. So polymorphism is really the method or the mechanism in object-oriented programming that allows actions to act differently based on the actual object that the action is being performed on. Now that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So the easiest way, as is the case with a lot of programming things, is to show you an example. Now, so what I'm going to do to actually demonstrate polymorphism, we need to create a number of classes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the classes all within this main public class, or in this the main.java source file, I should say, which is another way of creating classes that aren't going to be reused. The advantage of doing this is it's really only useful to create classes usually in the same Java source files if they are quite small and compact. If you start creating big classes and you've got multiple classes in a single Java file, you can find it gets quite confusing. And bear in mind also that when you're creating these classes, they usually are actual modified, depending on the modifiers you're using, they may not be accessible outside of the package. So we'll talk more about scope in a future video, but suffice to say now that the reason that I'm doing this is just to save a bit of time in the videos. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a basic class called movie, and then we're going to create a number of classes that relate to a specific movie that's come out of the past. So we're just going to inherit from that, and I'm going to show you how polymorphism works. So firstly, I've got this main.java created, which is our standard template. I'm going to create a new class movie, and it's going to have one field. We're going to have a private string, which is going to be the name of the movie. We're going to have a constructor, and its purpose is just to set the value for our field. And we're also going to have another method, and that method is going to be called plot, and that's going to be the plot for the film itself. In other words, the synopsis of what the movie is about. So public string plot is the method name, as you can see there. And the default the default string I'm going to return is going to be no plot here. And that will make sense shortly when we start creating some of these other classes. So that's our base class, and we're going to create 5 additional classes now, and they're all going to inherit from this base movie class. First one, class Jaws. Extends movie. I'm not sure whether you've seen it, but Jaws is a classic movie. So we need to create a constructor for that, but we're going to do constructors in a slightly different way for these subclasses. We're going to do a public Jaws. I'm going to put super Jaws. So I'm going to initialize that, and you can see that using inheritance, we're actually initializing the name field from the base class, which is in this case is the movie class. So that's our constructor, pretty straightforward. But we're also going to create a method called plot. It's going to have exactly the same parameters and return type. In other words, no parameters, and the same return type, which is string, as the base movie class. We're going to call it plot. We're actually going to now return the plot of Jaws. A shark eats lots of people. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but that's it in a summary. Okay, so that's our Jaws class, and notice how the method is exactly the same as the method that's in the movie. So we were overriding that. So probably what I should have done more correctly is use the override. But either way, the same process applies. The method has been overridden. So next one we're going to create is Independence Day, another one of the movies that I like. And that also extends movie. We're going to have a public constructor. Incidentally, if we use the automated constructor creation, it actually gets it a little bit wrong because it assumes that we want to initialize the class using a parameter, but we don't actually want to do that in this case. So I'm going to actually delete that and just type it in there. For our polymorphism example, it makes more sense doing it this way. Dependence day. And what I was saying was we can override it. We could also use override method, which is the same as typing it manually. And you can see there it's got the constructor we can override, but also it's got the method plot we can override. So I'm going to select that, press enter. But I'm not going to use the super. I'm just going to do a return. Aliens attempt to take over planet Earth. And I spelt that wrong. Independence Day. That's right. Okay, so we've got a few more to create. So let's create another one now for Maze Runner, another movie that I liked. Extends movie. And I'll just make a bit of space so we can see this with all these extra messages popping up. Same deal with the constructor. I'll just change that. Like so, and override the method for plot, and we'll put escape a maze. Okay, let's create another one. Another one that's strong in my memory. So when I was a child, Star Wars. Yes, you can tell I'm a bit of a geek. Star Wars extends movie. Same deal there, constructor. Update the constructor. And we'll call it Star Wars. Just capitalize that. And override the method. The plot. And the plot's going to be Imperial forces try to take over the universe. The last one we're going to create is a little bit different. We're going to create a class called Forgettable Movie. So it's not actually a specific movie. It's still going to extend from the movie though. Like so, same constructor. Now, importantly, we're not going to override the plot methods for this one. And this will make sense and actually show you how polymorphism works by not doing that. So you'll see that later on in this video. So okay, we've now got a base class. Just looking back at and reviewing what we've done. We've got our class movie, which has got a field called name. We've got a constructor that initializes that name. We've got a method called plot. Then we've got a total of 5 classes that extend or inherit from that movie class. They all initialize via the constructor, their own constructor, passing the parameter of the name of the particular movie, and that gets obviously saved in the base class. And most of them, 4 of the 5 classes have got their own plot method, which gives the plot, what the plot is, a very brief summary of the plot for each of those movies. Then we also created a 5th class called Forgettable, and it hasn't got the plot method, which we'll understand why it hasn't got that shortly. So moving on, what we want to do now is we want to create a method, a static method, because it's part of this main.java and not a separate class. And the purpose of this method will be to return a random movie. So it's going to return one of those 5 classes, one of those 5 movies. And you'll see why we're doing that shortly. So let's create that method. And we're going to do that with public static. Actually, what I'll do is we need to actually put it into the class. So I'm going to actually delete that to make a bit of space. Then make a bit of space up here. So we need to then create this method. This method is going to be part of the main class. It's going to be public static. We're going to return movie. So our return type is going to be the object movie. We're going to call this random movie. So its purpose is to return a random movie. In other words, one of those 5 movies. So in order to be able to return a random movie, we need to generate a random number so that each time that this method is called, obviously a random movie is selected. So how do we do that? We'll use a math function that comes with Java 8, which will generate a random number for us. So we're going to type int random number equals, and we need to cast it to int. You'll see why shortly. Int. Then we need to do math, capital M, math dot random. And you can see there that by default, this method, you can see on the right hand side there, it returns a double. That's why we're doing a cast of int, because we want to convert this to an integer. So by default, which you'll see, I'll take you into that method shortly, this will return a random number, a double between 0 and 1. So what we're then doing is we're converting that to an integer, and then we're multiplying, in this case, by 5. So by doing that, that's going to return a random number in the range 0 to 4. And what we're going to do then is add 1 to that. So in other words, we're going to return a number between 1 and 5. So if we just go into that class to have a look, to that method rather, and have a look, you can click into there, and you can see that this is a method pseudo number generator, and it returns a number greater than or equal to 0 and less than 1. So what we're doing is we're casting that as an integer, as I said, returning whatever the number is, and then multiplying the answer by 5, and that will give us an integer in this case between 0 and 4, and then we're adding 1 to that answer. And that's so it'll make more sense shortly while we're doing that, just so it makes our code a little bit easier to read. Now what we need to do is, well, actually what we'll do first is we'll print out what the number was. What random number generated was plus random number. So we'll know what the number is, so we can actually check that and see that on the screen. So next what we want to do is we need to do using the switch statement, we're going to actually create one of these movie classes. So we're going to do switch random number. We're going to put case 1. So if the random number generated was 1, we want to return a new, and of course the first one was Jaws. So we're going to return Jaws. Case 2, return new. The second one that we created was Independence Day. Now you notice I'm not adding a break there. The reason I don't need to add a break is we've got a return in there as the first line. So it would be redundant to actually go back here and put a break in there. You can put it in there if you wanted to, but we actually are returning from this method anyway, so there's no need to do that. Case 3, return new, and the third movie was Maze Runner. Case 4, return new, Star Wars. And lastly, case 5, we're going to return new Forgettable, our Forgettable movie. And then what we need to do here is we'll put a return null. And the reason we need to do that is technically, as far as the switch statements was concerned, we tested for the numbers 1 through 5, but as far as it was concerned, it could have other values. So we could have actually put a default in here to process based on that. So in other words, we could have put default return null, which then makes this return null down here void, or we can just leave that out. Either way, we need to actually handle the fact that it could be outside of that range. But the way we've defined random number, that shouldn't happen anyway. So what it's doing now, as you can see, depending on the number, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, we're going to return one of those movie classes. So each time we call this random movie method now, we should actually get a random movie return to us. And just take a look at the fact that we're actually returning the movie. So we're returning a base class, the superclass in this case, movie, because of course all these classes actually inherit from movie, and that's why we can use that once to apply to all these classes, because of course the way inheritance works, we can use that is a relationship. So we can say that Jaws is a movie, Independence Day is a movie, Maze Runner is a movie, and so on. That's the basic concepts of inheritance. But let's now have a look at the polymorphism aspect. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our main method up here, and we're going to create a for loop that actually goes through a number of times, retrieving a random movie, and then actually start using that polymorphism to actually call the relevant plot method for that class. So the way we do that is we're going to create a for loop first, where we're going to put for int equals 1, int less than 11, I plus. So we're going to cycle through a total of 10 times. I need to put a variable there. So to call the method, we're going to create a variable, movie equals random movie. So we've now got our movie in our movie object. Now let's print something out. So we're going to do print movie hash I. So that's the movie that we're working on. Next we're going to put a plus, and let's just tab over here and let's display what the movie name is. Now notice that there's no get name yet, and of course the reason for that is up here when I created the movie class I didn't create a getter. So I'm going to create a getter now, getter for the name field, and we'll now be able to use that to actually retrieve what the name of the movie is. So looking back down at our code again, we should now have that getter available. As you can see, it's there out of \n, and what that does, it actually generates a new line. So in other words, it starts the output on the next line. So we're adding that plus, and we'll just tab over again, and this time we're going to actually do the interesting thing, which really shows you how polymorphism works. We're going to put plot plus movie.plot plus, and we'll just create another new line. So we'll move on to the next line. So that's that one little part here. This movie.plot is really the definition and how polymorphism works. This is going to be better explained if I actually show you it running. So what I'm going to do is just close that side view like so, and we'll run it, and then I'll explain what it's done. And drag this over a little bit. So you can see what's happened there. Random number generated was 1. We got movie number 2. So the random number generated was 1. And if we look at our code again, case 1, we should be returning the Jaws movie. Next time, random number generated was 3. Movie number 3 should be Maze Runner, which it is there. We've got lots of 2s and 3s there as well, as you can see, but we've got Independence Day there as well. So can you see what's happening here? This is the beauty about polymorphism. Because if you're looking at that code, movie.plot, that's actually doing quite a bit of work. What it's actually doing, what Java is doing, it's looking at the object called movie, the variable that we created that was returned from the random movie method, and then it's going down and looking into that object and seeing, has it got a plot method? And you can see in this case, if we look at the first example for Jaws, going back up to our Jaws class, yes, we have got a method called plot. So therefore, it's smart enough to go, okay, I'm going to execute this method plot here in the Jaws class, and it automatically returns that a shark eats lots of people. And likewise for Maze Runner, you can see that we got a completely different output from Maze Runner. We actually got kids trying to escape a maze. So you can see what's happening is with that one line of code, this movie.plot, this is what polymorphism is. We're actually assigning different functionality depending on the type of object that we've created. Bearing in mind that all these objects are inherited from the base movie class, but we've assigned a unique bit of functionality in each of those plot methods for each of those classes. Now in this case, it's a very, very simple method that only outputs the name, or the plot I should say, for the movie. But you can imagine we could have a lot more complex functionality built into that if we wanted to. Now I'm just going to run this again because this random number generator is purely random, even though we've got what seemed to be a pattern there of the same number 3 a number of times. It is a random thing. So let's just run that again and get some different results, because I wanted to come up with number 5. And we can see that we've got different results this time, and we have actually got the results. We've got a 4 this time, which we didn't have last time, which is good. But we also got number 5, and this is the other point about polymorphism that I want to make. The random number generator was 5, and that equates to returning the new class called forgettable. So the movie number 3 in the loop was called forgettable, but plot, no plot here. So if we go back and have a look at our forgettable class, if you recall, we didn't actually create a plot method for that class. So what's happened again using polymorphism is that Java's looked at that and said, okay, there's no plot method here that has been overridden in this forgettable class. So as a result, it then looks and says, okay, I can see that we're extending from the movie class, and it'll go back up to the movie class, and it then finds the method called plot, which exists in the movie class, and that's where this code has been executed as coming from, no plot here, which is pretty cool. So you can see how polymorphism works now. It will automatically, if you're inheriting from another class and you've got a method and you override that method, that's what polymorphism is. It's giving unique functionality for the class that has inherited from a base class. So there you go. So that's the concept of polymorphism. I hope that makes a lot of sense to you. You'll find this is incredibly useful once you start developing more Java applications, because it really enables you to write quite generic code. Again, can you imagine if you didn't have the ability to do polymorphism, looking at something like this one-line movie.plot, you would have to figure out a way to decide what the type of class was and then to somehow call the appropriate class. So you'd probably have a large switch statement with the if class equals this name, then actually call this particular method. So it'd be a lot more work, in other words. But Java really makes it easy for you by adding this polymorphism capability automatically. So that's polymorphism. So I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we'll go ahead and start our polymorphism challenge. So I'll see you in that video.